This is a shir on the Sicha of Kedoshim, Aleph, in Likutei Sichos Chelek Yud Zayin, chapter, book 17. It's also, as it says in the asterisk of this Sicha, it's Parshas Kedoshim, it's also a siyum on the Masechta of Sanhedrin in Gemara. Says the Rabbi, in the difference between the instruction, the warning in the Torah, it says, don't steal, lo signoivu, it says in our Parsha in Kedoshim. You also remember that in the Aseres HaDibros it says, lo signov, don't steal. Says the Gemara, and Rashi brings it down in his Pirush on the Pasuk, that in our Parsha and Kedoshim, lo signov means don't steal money. Whereas, when it says, lo signov in the Aseres HaDibros in the Ten Commandments, there it speaks about don't steal, nefashos, don't steal, don't kidnap. The rationale behind that is because all the rest of those instructions in the Torah and Aseres HaDibros, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal. The other prohibitions are ones that carry with them a penalty of death. So the Leisignev also, in that context, that's one of the 13 ways the Torah is learned, is that since the whole Inyan there is talking about mitzvahs, Vedas, that carry with them a capital punishment, similarly the Leisignev there is talking about capital punishable by death kind of theft. What kind of theft is punishable by death? Kidnapping, when somebody steals a person. Regarding the prohibition about geneva of money, theft of money, our Chazal tell us in Masechtas Machos, it's the group of small Masechtas that are not necessarily a part of the regular Masechtas of Shas. They're sort of a compilation, an addendum. It's called Masechtas Machos. There it says, they're printed in the back of the Gemaras, but it's Chazal. It's like Gemara. There it says, Kol Hagoyin, if anybody who steals is as if he worships idols, as if he's worshiping the stars. In other words, if he's idolatrous. This that Chazal chose various averis, various transgressions, that if you do them, what does them, it's as if it's comparable to idolatry. We understand that because what Chazal is trying to tell us, knowing the exact language that Chazal uses and the being particular in what they're saying, we know it's not just to try and explain to us how bad that particular Aveda is. That it's so bad, theft is so bad, like the worst Aveda being idolatry. However, the actual zushtel, the actual example of saying that theft is like adultery, is not just to say that's how bad it is. It's also because there is some kind of a content, there's some kind of a joint content between the avera of theft and the avera of idolatry. So we have to understand, I skipped the square brackets for now, we have to understand what is it about theft, which is a mitzvah between bein adam lechaver, it's a mitzvah, interpersonal mitzvah. What is it about theft that makes it similar to Avodah Zarah? Going back to this square brackets, going back to the square bracket says that even more than that. Be'emes, every sin has a connection to Avodah Zarah, to idolatry. Why? Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, at great length, that when the Torah says in the first of the two Ten Commandments, there's I am Hashem, and he says that's the source of all doing mitzvahs, it incorporates all the doing mitzvahs, brings one closer to Hashem. And when it says Lo yihi elecha, don't have any other gods, any molten images, any avodah zarah, that includes all the 365 mitzvahs leitas. How does the Alter Rebbe explain that? Because through every sin that a person does, he transgresses Hashem's divine will. So at that time, he gets separated from Hashem. You're not doing what Hashem wants. You get separated from Hashem, God forbid. Just like Avodah Zarah is becoming separated from the oneness of Hashem. Every sin separates you from Hashem to a certain degree, and that's why every non-doing sin, every Avodah is really a part and portion of Avodah Zarah. However, nonetheless, Chazal, our sages, still give us various Avedas that about them particularly it said that they are similar and reminiscent to idolatry. Even though really all mitzvahs have an angle of separating you from Hashem, that's what an Aveda is. And that concept of Aveda is the same as the concept of Avodah Zarah. Nonetheless, from the fact that there are certain mitzvahs where Chazal, certain Avedas, where Chazal, our sages, point out they are like Avedas Zarah. This in itself tells us that there's something unique to them which makes them, in terms of their content, similar to Avodah Zarah. We want to understand what makes theft similar to Avodah Zarah. So we'll understand this first by going into the siyum, the ending of the tractate of Sanhedrin, the Gemara. Where there we find that the Gemara says as a particular Chomer gives a particular a great gravity and seriousness to Geneva. Where do we see it? The Gemara is going on the words of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that the Torah says about the Ir Hanidachas. Ir Hanidachas being a city where the majority of the people have been idolatrous and been warned. The whole city has to be wiped out. The whole city has to be burned. You're not allowed to take anything of the valuables of the city. The people, and because of their wickedness of all being idolatrous, the whole city, therefore their possessions also become now prohibited to have any benefit from it. They're burnt. And the Torah says, Lo yidbak biyotcha ma'uma menachem, you shall have nothing in your hand. You shall not keep anything in your hand from this cherem, from all these items that need to be destroyed. And then the Gemara says, and the Mishnah continues on that pasuk that so long as there are rishoim, there are wicked people in the world, anger comes to the world. Because the continuation of that pasuk is in order that Hashem don't have anything from the Ir Anidachas, from the idolatrous city, don't have anything, don't keep anything in your hand. The pasuk continues in order that Hashem should get rid of his chaloin af, of his anger. So the Gemara says, when there's wicked people in the world, Hashem's anger is in the world. When wicked people get destroyed from the world, then the anger of Hashem goes away from the world. That's what the Mishnah says. Comes the Gemara and says, and who are these wicked people about whom it says they bring anger to the world? Says Rabbi Yosef, Ganvi, these are thieves. So he is not understood. Both in the question of the Gemara and in Rabbi Yosef's answer. First of all, what's the Gemara answer? In the end of the Masechta Sanhedrin, the Gemara is asking, and who are those Rishoim? The Mishnah said, when there's bad, wicked people in the world, Hashem's anger is in the world. All of a sudden, the end of Masechta Sanhedrin. Masechta Sanhedrin is full of talking about behavior that would be considered Rishoim. The book of Sanhedrin is about judges. It's all about laws and judgments and so on, courts. It's full of discussion about Rishoim. All of a sudden, the end of the Gemara asks, what's a Rasha? You couldn't... I'm going to allow myself just to share a cute story to highlight this question, but in the positive. There was once a fellow who sent his son off to go to a tish, to go to a fabrengen, as the Polish groups of Hasidism, it's called a tish, the table of the Rebbe. He went to the table of a Rebbe, and the boy didn't understand Yiddish so much. When he came back and he asked, did you understand what the Rebbe said? So he said, you don't speak Yiddish, did you understand? He said, I understood a bunch of stuff. There's just one word I didn't understand. What's that word? He says, Eibishter. What is Eibishter? The word Eibishter means the one who's above, means Hashem. If that's the word the kid didn't understand from the tish, means he didn't get the whole point. I mean, the whole point of going to a Rebbe's tish is to get inspired about connection to Hashem. He didn't understand the one word in Yiddish that refers to Hashem, Eibishter. I'm using this story just to highlight the question here. The Rebbe says, if you finish the tractate of Sanhedrin, which speaks about justice and about courts, and you don't know what the word Rasha means, the Gemara has to add all the way at the end, what is a Rasha? Come on, we got to know. We know what Rasha is, what a wicked person is. Number two, the question is, what's the answer that Rishoim means thieves? Anyone that violates any sin is a Rasha. Right? We know that there's a law that for testimony, you need to have somebody who's not in violation of any of the mitzvahs. If somebody is known to be violating mitzvahs of Hashem on an ongoing basis, they are not allowed to be fit for testimony. We look, for example, by a chasana, when we need witnesses to witness the occasion of the chuppah, we look for people that are at least, in their consciousness, they're trying to do all the mitzvahs. They're not consciously in constant violation of a particular mitzvah. So what do you mean that only? And because if you violate a mitzvah, if you violate a sin consciously, knowingly, you're called a rasha by definition. it's a harsh term, wicked. You're not good. You're doing something not good. So why is the answer of Rabbi Yosef that these are thieves? It should be anybody that's violating something. So Mefarshim explain, since the answer of the Mishnah speaks about, what's the Mishnah talking about? The Mishnah is talking about not having anything that needs to be burnt because it's part of the idolatrous city, right? Now the question is, what does it mean in that context that so long as there's wicked people in the world, there's anger in the world? It couldn't be talking about the people of the idolatrous city because they all get killed and all the possessions get burned. So there's nothing left. The Torah says, don't have anything from those idolatrous possessions that should be burnt. So Hashem's anger shouldn't be there because so long, and then the Mishnah says, so long as there are bad people, Hashem's anger is there. What kind of bad people? You killed the people that are idolatrous. You burnt all the stuff of the idolatrous city. What's left? So that the Gemara says, no. How could there still be Rishoim even after you dealt with the idolatrous city? No. What happens if somebody stole? It's Ganovim. Somebody stole. This whole city was sequestered off, was cordoned off. Police lines, do not cross. The people that were idolatrous were warned about and killed. All the possessions have to be burned. This guy snuck in before they burned all the possessions. He took stuff. Then we're saying don't have anything from the sequestered, from the needing to be burned possessions. In order, Hashem's anger shouldn't be there, says the Gemara. How could there still be something left of those possessions? Ganavim, people that stole from that, they still have it. And now you have idolatrous possessions, and that's creating the anger of Hashem in the world. Says the Rebbe, that's not understandable. Why? Why does Yosef call them Ganvid? The problem is not that they stole. The badness that's left in the world is not because of stealing. It's because there's still idolatrous material. It's like having nuclear waste. Stole nuclear waste. Somebody stole nuclear waste. The problem is not that he stole. The problem is you have nuclear waste here that's radioactive. It's a problem. That's the problem. You have idolatrous stuff, and that's causing Hashem's anger. So why does Yosef say that the Ganovim? Sounds like the act of theft is the problem. More than that, continues the Rabbi, when we talk about Gineva, about stealing from these materials, by the way, it's forbidden to have any benefit. Now, there's a whole discussion in Halacha, when you steal something that nobody is allowed to have any benefit from, is it actually called theft? And even though we find that expression Chazal, stealing from that which needs to be destroyed, the language is used stealing, and it says about Ochan, famous story in the time of Yehoshua, when they conquered a city and everything was supposed to be given to Hashem. And Ochan took from what was already bequeathed to Hashem, which was forbidden for anyone to have anah from. But he stole from that, which means even though its benefit is prohibited, you can still talk about theft. That only means that you can use the language. You could apply the language thief also to something that is cherem, that needs to be totally either burnt or totally be given to Hashem. It's forbidden to have any benefit from. But Rabbi Yosef's answer speaks about theft. Rabbi Yosef's answer is really about the fact that the cherem is still around. That which needs to be burned and is idolatrous, is forbidden, is still here because it was stolen and still not dealt with. But the sin is not the ganav part. So maybe you can use the word ganav on it, but that's not the issue here. The issue is the cherem. Just quickly explain, why is there a discussion if you can talk about theft from something that's forbidden to derive any benefit from? What makes a possession a person's? The fact that he has the right to have the use of that possession. And if he also doesn't have the right to have the use of that possession, for example, chametz, after the time, and it's prohibited, nobody can have benefit from it. So technically, it doesn't belong to him. Something belongs to you if you're able to use it. If you're not able to use it, with what does it belong to? And that's by Pesach, Hashem said, even though technically it's not yours, but if it did belong to you, as the Torah made it yours, that you, God forbid, would violate the issur of having chametz. So you have to get rid of it, you have to burn it. At any rate, chapter 3 here, Gimel. The Inyan, we can understand this through explaining the different language that the Mishnah uses different than the Braisa. The Braisa, as we're going to explain, Braisas usually speak more lengthy than Mishnah. I'm jumping ahead one paragraph here. Braisas usually speak more lengthy than Mishnah because the Mishnah is a compilation of of an encapsulation of what needs to be transmitted. The Mishnah is shortened. The Mishnah uses minimum words possible to get the full message of the halacha across. That's why we need the Gemara to extrapolate later from the Mishnah what is the intention of the Mishnah. Braisas, the word braisa means outside. These are the teachings that remained outside the compilation of the Mishnah. So it's a whole body of material, but they're more lengthy. Didn't need to be so encapsulated, so precise, so exacting with using only the minimum amount of words. So usually braisas are going to be longer than Mishnahs. You find, that's why the Gemara, you find many times braisas. Braisas are teachings of the sages that are bar, they were from the outside. They're not incorporated in the Mishnah, but there's a lot more information. So we will ask on a Mishnah from a braisa, which gives us more information and allows us to see a different angle, right? Here, what does the braisa say here? The Braisa says, Tana Rabbanan was taught by the sages. When a wicked person comes to the world, anger comes to the world. How could a wicked person come to the world? It means once he becomes wicked, not he's born. In the footnotes at 22, the Rabbi says, you're not born wicked. We know from the Tanya, we know from the Gemara, but the Tanya makes a big deal to say, you're not born wicked or not. That's free choice. When a person becomes wicked, when he debuts into the world, so to speak, as a wicked person, could happen later on in life. It says, never trust yourself to the day you pass away. It could even happen in old age, God forbid. But anyway, when a bad person comes to the world, a Rosh comes to the world, anger comes to the world, as it says in the Pasuk in Mishlei, that when a Rosh comes, also denigration comes, and also shame, and humiliation, degradation, bad stuff comes. When a Rasha goes away from the world, then goodness comes to the world. The world has been cleansed of wickedness. As it says that when the Rishonim are destroyed, there's joy. Then he continues to the Braisa, when a tzaddik comes to the world, goodness comes to the world. As it says about Noach, when Noach was born, this person will comfort us from our deeds and from the frustration, the sadness of the works of our heart. Till then they would plant and they would only grow thorns and thistles, as the Pasuk says in Bereshis. Noach came and he created a system of plowing, and things started to grow in his time. He's a tzaddik. He came to the world. He brought blessing to the world. That things started to grow in a productive manner. Now, the Braisa speaks a little bit longer than the Mishnah. We expect that, as we said, right? Braisas are about being longer than Mishnah. We find that all over Shas. What we don't understand here is it seems to be that the Mishnah here spoke longer than the Braisa. Why? The Mishnah says, Chaloin af. The Mishnah says, the anger of Hashem, and uses two words, Chaloin af, is in the world when there's wicked people. When the wicked people go away, the Chaloin af, the anger, literally the anger of the nose, because the nostrils become inflamed when a person is angry, when the Chaloin af goes away. The Braisa just says, Chaloin, anger, doesn't use it. We just gave a whole explanation that Braisas are able to be more free with words and speak longer. Here the Mishnah spoke longer. Especially at Manavshach. Any way you look at it, you have a question. If the Braisa is speaking in continuation to the Mishnah and commenting on the Mishnah, it should have said Charoinaf, just like the Mishnah says. And if it's got to do with the Pasuk, right? The Pasuk just brings about when a Rasha comes to the world, right? The Pasuk and Mishnah say there's boys, there's denigration and calling. Doesn't say anything about anger. If it's commenting directly on the Pasuk, it doesn't say anger, the word chalain. So why speak about chalain? And also, when it says that when a Rasha comes to the world, it sort of said when badness comes to the world. As it says, when a Rasha comes to the world, it should have just said not anger, but badness comes to the world. Just like it says in the inverse, that when a tzaddik comes to the world, good comes to the world, right? So good comes to the world when a tzaddik comes. You should have just said not the word chalain. You should have said bad comes to the world when a bad person comes. So we want to understand all these things. The explanation. There's a difference in content between the Mishnah and the Braisa. The Mishnah is speaking about the idolatrous city, Irani Dachas. And in the continuation, the Mishnah, when he brings the pasuk, you shall have nothing from the cheder and from that which needs to be burned in your hands. Does the Mishnah, so long as there are wicked people Rishonim in the world, there's charoin after, there's the anger of Hashem in the world. What does that mean? That means that the sin of the of Irani Dachas, the idolatrous city, such a powerful, such a stringent sin like Avodah Zarah. And that's why the Mishnah says that Chaloinaf, the anger of Hashem comes to the world, highlighting the anger part. Because we find the expression of Hashem's anger in that way, Chaloinaf, specifically related to Avodah Zarah, to idolatry, as the Rambam says. It arouses Hashem's ire and anger, Chaloinaf, the full anger. The Brai says, however, speaking generally about not about the idolatry sin, especially that during the times of our sages, the sin of idolatry was banished from the list of our extreme temptations. Anshe Knesset Agdelo, they prayed that we shouldn't have that sin. So the Bryce is talking more practically, and the Bryce is talking about bad in general, Rishoyim, wicked people in general. Not about the unusual case of somebody post Tanakh times, already in the Mishnah times, the unusual case of them being idolatrous. That wouldn't be usual. The Dacha, especially the whole city should be idolatrous. That's very unusual. The Bryce is talking about a different case. Generally, bad people. Russia comes to the world. Stam Russia. It does Averis. Not specifically Avodah Zarah. So therefore he says Chaloin. It doesn't say the full-blown anger. Chaloin, anger comes. It doesn't say anything about Af. However, there is a joint connection between the Mishnah and the Braisa. The Mishnah says that so long as there are a shoyim in the world, Hashem's anger, Chaloin, is in the world. The Braisa also says that language. Rasha. When Rasha comes to the world, there's Chaloin in the world. The word Chaloin is connected to Rasha. And it says when there's a Rasha, there's Chaloin, there's anger. Until the time when Rashoim, when wicked people are going to be banished from the world. So the question is, so we understand why the word Chaloinaf is used in the Mishnah, because it's talk about idolatry, right? But why by other sins do we talk about Chaloin? Even though we're not giving the full-blown anger, the two words Chaloinaf, we're still talking about Chaloin. Why? Rosh Hastam, why do we speak about Chaloin? Even after the sin is not doing, we're saying so long as the wicked person is here, there's a certain anger. Why? So the Rabbi continues the explanations like this. From the fact that the Mishnah says that so long as there are Rishoyim, wicked people in the world, and not like it says in Sifri, so long as there is idolatry in the world, there's anger. He says, no, so long as there are wicked people in the world, what does that tell us? From this, it's imperative to say, according to the Mishnah, the anger is not just because there is an actual entity, a metzius, an existence of Avodah Zarah, of idolatry that's causing Hashem's anger to be inflamed in the world. No, but because there are wicked people, that they have violated the sin of idolatry. They have violated it in a way that they've taken from the idolatrous possessions that should have been burnt, and they've taken it. It's still around. Even though that those possessions may no longer be there. But if they did the act of taking them, that creates the existence within them of being Rishoyim, and that creates Hashem's anger. The Gemara asks, so who are these Rishoyim? The Gemara asks. Remember, we're going now to the question about the Gemara asks, who's the Rishoyim? We know what wicked people are. That's not the question of the Gemara. The Gemara asks, in this context, what kind of a Rishoyim are meant here? What kind of an evil, what kind of a wickedness which continues, even after the act was done, continues to bring the anger of Hashem to the world? Even after perhaps the actual material of Avodah Zarah is no longer there. It's like saying, go back to the analogy of radioactive waste. The radioactive waste was already disposed of. Why is there still anger from the person who stole that radioactive waste? This Rabbi says, because we're talking about Ganovim, thieves. The Mishnah is talking about these kind of wicked people, that their connection to the Avodah Zarah, to the idolatry, is because of the theft. They stole the material that was supposed to be burned, the booty of the idolatrous city. And since it was done in a way of thievery, so that's why so long as the wicked person is in the world, the anger of Hashem is in the world. The anger of Hashem continues even when this radioactive waste, in inverted commas, even when this stolen, even when this idolatrous material has already been disposed of. What is special about theft? What is unique about theft? That the anger still continues, that the act, so to speak, is still continuing. So here's the explanation. We'll talk about the prohibition, chapter 6. Talking about the prohibition of of theft, either Geneva or Gezela. Soon we'll speak about the difference between a Ganav and a Gasam. We're talking about the prohibition of theft. There's a special stringency and severity in the act of thievery, and that is that it's an ongoing activity. In the language of the Achreidim, it's called the Pa'ula Nimsheches, an action that is a continuing action. Every moment that you don't give back the stolen item, you are transgressing on the prohibition of thievery. Says Leisinav, don't steal. It's not you stole once and it was done once and that's it. It's that so long that this is not returned, that action of stealing is as if it's recurring. Every moment you're stealing again. The Rogat Shova going explains, according to this way, the Rambam, when he gives the prohibitions of not stealing, he puts these prohibitions in the classification of the kinds of avedas that a person has transgressed, but it's a transgression lav shenite letashlumin. It's a transgression that's been given to be paid. In other words, it's not. He doesn't put it in the classification of lav shenitak laasei. What does a lav shenitak laasei means? A prohibition that's connected to a doing. In other words, a connection, a lav, when somebody Torah says don't do something, you could look at stealing as being like this. Torah says don't steal. If you did steal, return it. So it's a transgression that's connected with a way to fix it. Right? It says, don't take the mother, don't take the kids of no, I shouldn't mix in things that I haven't looked up. Make sure they fit the classification. Here the Rebbe is saying that you could look at theft as being a lav shenita glase. It's a prohibition connected to a doing. Don't steal. If you did steal, give it back. Says the Rambam learns no. Because the Rambam learns it's a lav shenita l'tashlumin. It's a transgression, and the release from that transgression is to pay back. What's the difference? A subtle, nuanced difference. When there's a law, a transgression that's connected to an asay, so nitak means actually to disengage, to disattach. The asay, when you do the doing thing, paying back, it disattaches the negative, the lav, what was done wrong. And it's as if what was done wrong was never done. However, by Geneva, the Rogat Shava learns that the Rambam is telling us by Geneva, it's considered a lav, a transgression that you're able to pay for. So long as you haven't paid, it's an ongoing transgression of theft. When you pay back the theft, so it's just that from now on, there's no thievery going on. But you haven't uprooted all those moments till you paid back. Yeah, that's how it's being learned. And the Rebbe goes in Order 37. It will be difficult to. We have to figure out how to fit this in with what the Rambam says, that we don't give malchus. There's no lashes given for thievery, because the Torah has disconnected it through a rectifying action which can be done, which is to pay back, and then you won't get lashes for having done the thief because you paid back. Then it's as if you didn't do the thing. That's what the Rambam seems to be saying. Here we're saying that's not the case. But this is a long discussion. Here the Rebbe is going with what the Rogat Shava explained, that it's an ongoing sin. When you steal something, it's not just now; it's ongoing. You can pay back, but that doesn't uproot totally what was done. What is this going to explain to us? According to this, we'll understand Zion. According to this, will be understood the Chiddush in our case. Because Geneva is an ongoing, we look at it as an ongoing act. It's not just a one-time thing, but so long as it hasn't been returned, it's as if you're continuing to steal. So every moment, you're violating the prohibition of don't steal. So long as you haven't paid back, you're in continued new violation. What derives from that is that even when the item may not be in the world, but still the continuation is going on of the act of theft that you did. Um, even though the thing's not there, but the act that the person did that he hasn't rectified in any way. That act is still there in presence of Hashem. That person stole, and that stealing is ongoing. There's no one to return it to. Stealing is ongoing, and therefore, this is not something you find. Is noch als nimshach bei die gamme der Rishus von Pulas Ageneve, warum mir gefintach nicht, das ist nur bis mir verbrenntem Chelem. This act of wickedness that is associated with the stealing is ongoing, hasn't been erased. So he's still an active Rasha. And since the wickedness is an ongoing, in theft, is an ongoing Pu'ula, and here in this case, he took from an idolatrous city in Avodah Zarah. So this kind of Rasha in the world, if they haven't done Teshuvah for the Avodah Zarah, so then there's the anger of Avodah Zarah in the world. In other words, if I understand correctly, and I'm not 1,000,000% sure that I do, usually when somebody steals something, even though it's a Pa'ula Nimshechas, it's a continued action of theft, you give it back, at least from now on, that's uprooted. You're no longer actively doing theft. Whether or not it totally uproots what was done before in the inside, the top, the pnim as we call it, the inside of the sikha, the Rebbe is saying that it would only cut off your ongoing sin of theft from when you paid back, but does not uproot your theft. In the footnotes, Rebbe is saying that the Rambam seems to say elsewhere that once you pay back, you're actually going back to the time of theft as if rectifying what you did in the first place. And okay. But what about here? When a person stole something of the idolatrous city, the chedem has to be burnt. So it doesn't matter if it was burnt already. The act of Gneva is still there. And the act of Gneva is an act of Gneva associated with Avodah Zarah. So till the person cleanses himself of Avodah Zarah, and within him, he still has this Avera that's Avodah Zarah based, and an idolatrous based Avodah Zarah brings anger to the world. I'm just not 100% sure. So, how will he get rid of the Geneva? Usually, you can give back what was stolen, and then at least from now on, you're not doing the Avera. Here, there's nobody to give it back to, even though it was burnt. But that's not seemingly here. I'm saying that's not rectifying the act of Geneva. Possibly, once a person does the tshuva for the Avodah Zarah part, then automatically he's gotten rid. He's canceled. What was the problem? The problem was he stole what needed to be burnt, because it's Avodah Zarah. The moment he cleanses himself of Avodah Zarah in his belief, so now maybe his Avodah stops, because he's no longer associated with Avodah Zarah. Anyway, I'm not 100% sure. Ches. Now we'll be able to understand this. We'll give explanation of the words of the Braisa. So it says, a Rasha comes to the world. When a Rasha comes to the world, anger comes to the world. Even after doing the Aveda. Not when badness is in the world, when a Rasha comes to the world. Why? Since the Mishnah is not talking about the fact, the Mishnah itself was also not talking about the fact of Avodah Zarah being there in reality. The Mishnah is saying, the moment the person, the way the Gemara explained it, it's talking about Ganovim, talking about an action that's ongoing because his theft is ongoing. The act of the theft is still ongoing. Not whether the thing is actually there, the angering thing, the offending material of Avodah Zarah may have already been destroyed. Since we're not talking about the mitzvahs of Avodah Zarah being in the world, no, but we're talking about the act, the sinful act of the one who has done the sin. We're talking about the gavra, the person, not the actual, not talking about the radioactive waste, so to speak, that's in the world. No, talking about the guy that violated the rules and took that stuff. That's a dangerous person. So now we can understand that this point, that the negativity, the wickedness of the person who engaged in a willfully in a negative act is still there, even if the act is gone already. This is also by other sins, because also by somebody who's done an avera that doesn't have this special quality of it being looked at as an ongoing activity. But when a yid does this avera, what's happening? He has right away the mitzvah to do teshuvah for the sin. So long as he doesn't do teshuvah, so every moment he's violating the mitzvah of doing teshuvah. And therefore the Braisa says that when a wicked person comes to the world, Hashem's anger comes to the world. So long as the person is still considered, not when badness comes to the world, because could be the act, could be the what was done is already canceled. The bad thing is no longer there, but the person is still bad because the person didn't do tshuva. When a bad person comes to the world, till he does tshuva, so there's always going to be Hashem's anger in the world. The Braisa doesn't have to say which Avera is talking about. There's an underlying theme in every Avera. Every Avera is disassociating from Hashem and needs tshuva. Any Avera you do, so long as the person didn't do tshuva, is considered a Rasha. And therefore, there's also going to be Chas v'shalom Hashem's anger in the world. Test. According to what we just explained, we'll understand also why Geneva. Remember, we started by asking why is Geneva similar to theft more than any other sins? Because just like we find by Avodah Zarah, that even after the action of the actual chait, it still brings anger to the world. As the Sifri says, so long as there is idolatry in the world, Hashem's anger is in the world. In other words, so long as there is the existence of idolatry in the world, there's constantly the anger of Hashem in the world. Similarly, that happens by Geneva. Since the Geneva is an act that doesn't stop, so until you haven't paid back, it's the Geneva is ongoing, an ongoing activity. So he's constantly drawing down Hashem's ire, Hashem's anger. Just like Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah, so long as it's there, it creates an anger. Geneva is always there because it's as if the action is always being done. Hashem, other sins are not like that. Even though, as the Braisa said, also by other sins, there's some aspect of Hashem's anger in the world. And they're also similar to Avodah Zarah because, right, disenfranchising from Hashem. However, the continuation of the anger is not because of the actual sin that was done. It's because you're not rectifying, you're not doing tshuva. It's not that the sin is being constantly reenacted, so to speak. No, it's that you did something wrong, now you have to do tshuva. So it doesn't have that full similarity to Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah, just by its mere presence in the world, causes the anger of Hashem in the world. Geneva, the act of Geneva is an ongoing act, and therefore, so long as it's in the world and it hasn't been rectified by being paid back, it's constantly drawing down, so to speak, Hashem's anger. Yud. What we have to understand is, why does Rabbi Yosef say Ganvi, not Gazlan? Or Ganovim and Gazlonim? What is the difference in a Ganav and a Gazlan? We'll soon talk. A Ganav is somebody who comes surreptitiously, hiding. A Gazlan is somebody who comes in brazen, chutzpah daylight. Gazlan doesn't care about anybody seeing him. Ganav tries to be sneaky. But why doesn't, this concept of the ongoing act of the Avera being considered as if it's going on is both by Ganovim and by Gazlonim. So why does he specify only Ganovim, the ones that come sneakily? Also, why does it say that the anger of Hashem comes to the world? Why doesn't it just say, like we said, by a tzaddik it says, when a tzaddik comes to the world, goodness comes to the world. Why doesn't the Braisa just say, when a Rasha comes to the world, badness comes to the world? Why anger? The third question that the Rabbi asks is, charoin, anger is worse than just bad. Why should sins cause not just bad, but even charoin? What is it about them? So we're going to understand according to what the Gemara says. This is the Gemara in Baba Kama. The students of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yechon, Zakkai's students asked him, why does the Torah say that a Ganav is dealt with more harshly than a Gazlan? A Ganav has to pay twice. If somebody's stolen and found to have thieved in a sneaky way, in a hidden way, he pays twice, kefil. He has to pay a penalty, double what he stole. Gazlan, somebody comes in broad daylight, pays only once. Why? Wouldn't you think that the guy who comes with a brazen chutzpah is worse? He should pay double, not the other guy. No. He says, you know what the problem is? The Ganav has at least given as much credence to, I'll paraphrase what it says. This one, the Gazlan, the one who comes brazenly, has at least given a covet. He's given the covet to the servant as the covet to his master. And this one didn't equate the covet of the servant, the honor of the servant, to the honor of the master. In other words, the guy who's coming hiddenly has said as if Hashem's eye that's down below doesn't see, and Hashem's ear doesn't hear. As if he says Hashem has Hashem has left the world. He doesn't see what's going on down here. In other words, the guy comes sneakily. He's just trying to make sure nobody sees him down below. And he's trying to, nobody sees me. But Hashem sees you. The Ganav is being chutzpahdik to people down below, being chutzpahdik to Hashem, but also chutzpahdik to people down below. The guy who's coming hiddenly is being chutzpahdik only to Hashem. He's not giving as much kavod or denigration to Hashem as he's giving to people below. He's giving more credence to people below. He wants to make sure he's not seen. Hashem's seeing you. No, it's as if Hashem doesn't see. It's as if he's saying, Hashem is not here on earth. He's out of the picture. As long as I hide from people, I'm okay. This explanation will also explain why Rabbi Yosef says that the shoim are meant to ganovim. That's what's being angry. Why? Because the sin being done in a way of Geneva, in a sneaky way, what this depicts, what this expresses is idolatry. Because what the Ganav is saying is that Hashem is not here on the earth. Hashem has abandoned earth. Maybe the Ganav believes that Hashem is the big boss, but he's not here. That's Avodah Zarah, that Hashem is not in total control, not totally present. That's idolatry. That's why he says the Ganvi, those that steal the Avodah Zarah, the act of theft, together with that, is in itself a continuation of the Avodah Zarah is stealing. And that's why the Braisa says that every Avera is bringing anger, not just bad, but anger, because by every Avera there's a similar theme. Think about it. The fact that a person allows himself to sin is a sign that the way he's treating Hashem is that Hashem is not watching, right? And as it says in the pasuk, the Navi says, "Can a person hide himself in a hiding place and I don't see him?" In other words, any time a person sins, it's really saying subtly, he's saying, "Oh, Hashem's not going to see. I just have to make sure nobody sees me." But Hashem, he doesn't see me. And like Rabbi Yechim told his students, may it be Hashem's will that you should have so much fear of heaven, like you have fear of other mortals. And they said, what? Not Khan? That's all you expect of us? To treat Hashem as we treat other mortals? In other words, be fearful of Hashem as other mortals? He says, Alavai! He says, Alavai, because just know like this. People often say, when a person does a sin, they say, I hope nobody sees me. What do you mean nobody sees you? Have as much covet for Hashem as you have for people. You won't do any sin. You say, I don't want somebody to see me sinning. Mela, we understand when a person sins, he's in a way saying Hashem's not here. That's Avodah, that's idolatry. So now we understand what the Gemara says, that because of an Aveda, wickedness comes. And that's why anger comes. Because it's midah keneged midah. It's tit for tat, so to speak. As the pasuk says, when Rasha comes, denigration comes, humiliation comes. Why should that happen? Because since through doing an Avera, a person is denigrating and humiliating and insulting Hashem, as if to say he's not here, he doesn't see. That's why that's what it brings. Degradation, humiliation comes to the world for that. And the anger of Hashem. Because the result of being denigrating and insulting to Hashem is that you're acting idolatry-like. Idolatry, that brings anger. So that's what the Braisa speaks about, the anger of Hashem. And even more, even after the sin has been done already, but still in all, there's the anger of Hashem so long as the Rosh is still here, so long as the person, even if the deed has already disappeared, but the person is here and he hasn't yet done tshuva, so then the reason for the anger is still here. The person is still living his life in a way that he doesn't pay attention to Hashem. He hasn't changed his behavior, his modality hasn't changed from being somebody who figures Hashem's not here, so to speak. Yud Aleph. We know that the end of every Masechta has a connection to the beginning of the Masechta, and also to the name of the entire Masechta. So now we have to understand when a Hadran, when we make a completion of Masechta and give a talk about it, we want to understand what's the connection between the end of the Parsha and the beginning of the end of the Masechta and the beginning of the Masechta. It's also by us. In the first Mishnah, the way the Mishnayos were set up in the Gemara, the details of judgments of based in Sanhedrin courts of law are enumerated. It starts by saying that monetary judgments are done in a court of 3. And then it says there's a court of 21, and then there's not 21, 23. There's a court of 23, and then there's the court of 71. The Sanhedrin, the main Sanhedrin is 71 people. So even though that every basin, whether it's 3 or 23 or 71 has its own set of laws, the things that it's allowed to judge. Nonetheless, there's something uniquely, there's some common thread in all of them. And that is that all of any level of court that a person is, 3, 23, or 71, it's not just to make sure to get rid of injustice, of evil once it happens, but it's in order to lechatchila make sure it's what we can call preventative work, to make sure that injustice and badness and evil never happens in the first place. As it says in Tonad Velio Rabba, it says that the Sanhedrin of 71, they also had upon them the task to tie themselves, to gird themselves with chains of metal, gird their loins. In other words, fortify the lower half of their body with chains of steel, to pick up their clothes higher than their knees, to be able to walk quickly. You know, when they used to wear long robes, you have to walk more dignified, more slowly. You want to run, you got to lift up your clothes, and to go in all of the cities of the Bnei Yisrael, all the places the Jews are, to teach them. This seems to be a wondrous kind of difficult to understand thing, says the Rabbi. The people of Sanhedrin, who are the people of Sanhedrin? They were the people that were great scholars in Torah. They had great minds, tzaddikim, like people, really dignified, venerable sages. And they sat right next to in the Beis Hamikdash. They had a special office on the premises of the Beis Hamikdash. So, and they were called. If they're not there, they're not called Sanhedrin. They have to be, in other words, in the holiest place of the world, sitting there, venerable, dignified people. How do you tell them that they have to go and tie themselves up with, really firm chains to be able to walk far distances, pick up their clothes in a not so dignified way, higher than their knees, to be able to have easier access to walk? How does that fit for such venerable sages? Especially to leave the holy place of the Beis Hamikdash. And what are we doing? In order to make sure that the Jews are going on the straight path. These are people that live in the outskirts, periphery, simple people probably. Why are you taking the most venerable sages to do this? So the explanation of this comes in the end of the Masechta. Because the end of the Masechta says that so long as there is bad people in the world, it brings anger Hashem in the world. And not just while they're doing the bad, but while the bad people are in existence, even after the actual bad deed may no longer be there, but they still haven't changed their state of being. And it's not just that it's an ongoing negativity that's in the world, time-wise, but it's also unlimited in space. It brings the anger of Hashem to the world at large, not just to the place that they are. Oh, so this affects not just the person who's doing the sin, it affects the whole world. It affects even the Jews that are the most venerable of Jews, who are part of the 71 sages. So therefore we understand they also therefore have the achrayus and the obligation to make sure that they shouldn't lechatchila not come to a situation that causes the anger of Hashem in the world. In other words, it's going to affect them too. You take them out of their holy place, their dignified state, because otherwise, there's anger will come to the world. Rabbi brings here footnote 58 to point out in the good side that a person always has to see. Rambam says a person always has to see himself exactly equal. And if you're equal and you do one more good deed, your balance tilts for the good. If the whole world is also equal, if the whole world is full of good guys, bad guys, and you make yourself good, so now you join the good guys, now the whole world gets tilted. So what we're doing affects the entire world, even the Sanhedrin. That's why they have to go out and do stuff. Now that ever comes with the teaching for us, Yud Beis. According to this, we can understand another Inyan. Every part of Torah is an instruction to Yid, every Yid. So now the question is, what is this teaching us? That when a Rasha comes to the world, there's badness in the world, a tzaddik comes to the world, goodness comes to the world. It's difficult to say that it's just coming to tell us how bad a sin is. That Aveira causes negativity, it causes the anger of Hashem of the world. And through good deeds, on the other hand, there's goodness and reward in the world. Because already in Torah, in the written Torah, we find the instructions and the mitzvahs of the Torah, and there's so much talk about the reward and about the punishment if you do the wrong thing. And it says in general, the Pashas B'chukei say, if you follow in my chukim, I'm going to give you It rains in the proper time. I'm going to give you peace in this earth, in the world. There's already all these things are said in the Torah. We don't need a Bryce at the end of Masechet Sanhedrin to tell us that. According to what we just explained, we're going to get a very wondrous, inspiring teaching. What is? When a Yid, Chas v'Shalom, transgresses, falls, stumbles in an Aveda, he may think, yeah, for sure, one day I got to get around, put on my bucket list, I got to get around to doing tshuva one day before I go on, before I move on from this world. But what's the rush? I can delay the tshuva for a little bit. No big deal. Got other stuff to do. Maybe I even got good deeds to do. Let me not deal with doing teshuva, with returning to Hashem from whatever I did wrong. Same kind of thought can be about the doing good. Oh, I know I got to do some good stuff. I have a good resolution. I'm going to get to it. I know eventually it's a good thing to do. But there's no rush. In the meantime, let me do my business, my regular stuff. The mitzvah will wait. Don't worry. I'm going to do it. Of course, make it wait. About this, the Gemara says, and it teaches a Jew like this. You can't have such a behavior pattern. Why? So long as you haven't done teshuvah, so the negativity is a constant. It's a constantly pumping and invoking chas v'shalom, the anger of Hashem. Not just when you're actually doing the sin. More, it's not just that it's constantly an ongoing source of negativity in the world, but it's affecting the entire world. So long as this individual hasn't done teshuvah, so the anger is all over the world. Similarly, when we talk about doing good, tzaddik over here doesn't mean a tzaddik like in the Tanya, is to be a person in full control of all of his faculties and never done anything bad. No, that's a tzaddik level of the Tanya, is a big level. Here we're talking about a tzaddik, about people that are doing good deeds, right? So doing good deeds doesn't just bring good for you, it brings good to the whole world, and not just now, always ongoing. So what are you going to put it off for? You got to get to it right now. It's critical. When a Yid thinks about it, that he has this great possibility hinged on him, is this great thing. He can either, God forbid, have anger come into the world, but he can get rid of this anger if he just gets to it and cleans up his act and doesn't delay it. Anger goes away. And on the other hand, he can get the goodness of Hashem to come to the world with quicker if he gets to the good act quickly. So that will be enough. It's going to give him a treisel that does imuzen a treiselton. It's going to shake him up. You're going to give him a good shake up in a good way. Wow. And it's going to help him actualize even more swiftly, with more alacrity, the good achlotas, the good resolutions that is made to bring immediately good to the world. Let's get to it right away. Bring Mashiach.